Hi, this is Rachel with Pure. Welcome to Module 1. I'm going to be discussing layers, masks, and brushes. This might sound like it's super basic, but this is the beating heart of Photoshop, and we're going to show you everything from the very beginnings of what a layer is, all the way up to advanced masking techniques. So let's get started. Okay, this is your layer palette. Right now, I just have the background layer, but there are ways to get a lot of layers. We're going to work through this organically. You'll understand how these layers work as we move along. It's almost like when you were in elementary school and you had an overhead projector and the teacher would put down the one layer and it would have your math test on it, and then they would stick another layer on top of it that had the answers written out. Or if you ever made a diorama where you have the background and then you put the little people, and then in front of them you have some little trees on the sides, and then you have little bushes, and then you have little rabbits and flowers, and they're all coming layer upon layer, and you're looking through this scene through these layers. It's the lens of the edits and the layers. That's what the layer palette is, each thing building upon top of each other. And so that's what the layer palette is, and you'll see as we work through it. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is how are we going to make a new layer? So one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we're going to make a duplicate layer. This is a very important thing in Photoshop. Whenever you think I'm going to get in here and I'm going to start healing and cloning and liquefying and all these things, sometimes people will just start working on their background layer, and then it's really hard to undo any issues you may have. So we're going to create a duplicate layer. Command J or Control J. If you're on a PC, it's going to be Control J. Command J. It's a new layer. And look, it's the same thing. I remember it's J, jump, because it looks like it jumps up out of the background layer. So Command J, jump that layer up. Okay, so what am I going to do on this layer? You know, I talked a little bit about coming in and healing. That's what we're going to do. So this layer is going to be all about healing. Normally, I would not remove all of her adorable freckles because I think they're super duper cute. But to show you how this works, I'm going to do this because we're also going to start talking about brushes and masks on this layer as well. We're going to bring in other layers and show you more things you can do. But for the time being, okay, I'm taking out all of those little freckles. They're adorable. But okay, I've also taken out some of those eyebrow things and maybe a little bit of this extra makeup that kind of was on her eyelids and things like that. Okay, so it's all gone. Look at that. Oh my goodness, they're all gone. But look, I can come over here and click. Look, they're back. I've hidden them by clicking the eye, so we can't look through that layer anymore. And bang, look at, they're gone again. I could even come over here and adjust my opacity. Opacity means, look, so now I brought them all back. You can't see through that layer anymore. That layer is hidden. It has 0% opacity. 0% of it can be seen. But here I start to bring it back, and slowly you're going to see them fade away. Look at 35%. They're going away. Look at, we're getting up to 50. They're almost gone. Gosh, 72. You can hardly see them. And by the time that we're at 100, they're completely gone. Again, everything that I took away is gone. So you could say, oh, maybe I just want light freckles, just a few freckles, you know, just very light. I could bring it down to here. But for the time being, what I'm saying is, okay, we have no freckles. Now say I go about this and I say, you know what? I've changed my mind. I actually want her adorable nose freckles back, but maybe I want it to stay cleaned up here, and I want those eyebrow bits gone, and maybe I want those little moles that were over here. Maybe I want those gone. Yeah, okay. So, but I've gotten rid of all of them. Do I have to just start over and do it again? No, you don't, because you're working on a duplicate layer. So this is fantastic. I can come down. I'm going to select this layer. I've selected my layer 1. You can tell it's active because it's all gray here. It's been selected. It's lighter. Okay, I'm going to come down. This is my mask, add a new layer mask icon. It looks like a square with a circle in the middle of it. I'm going to click it. As you can see, it's added mask. Nothing's really changed though. So when we're working in Photoshop, one of the important things to remember, this is a white layer. White reveals, black conceals. So we look at this little white rectangle. It looks like a window, right? A clean, bright window that you can look through. So I can see all these edits, all these removing all of these little freckles. They're gone, right? Because we're looking through, we can see all the edits that we've made. Now, if I turn it black, Command I, Look at that. Do you see how I've just inverted it? I invert. Command I, Control I. I've inverted it. You know what? It's dark. It's like I've thrown a black window covering over my window and I can't see any of the edits I have done. So I can only see what's on the background layer. Command I. Look, it's white. I'm revealing them again. White. The freckles are gone. I can see the edits that I've made. But that brings me back to my question. Okay, but I wanted to have her nose freckles, but I do want to get rid of the things up here. What am I supposed to do? Okay, you know what? So I click my brush tool, B, or I can come over here and choose my B, brush key, B, B, B. Okay, so you choose B. Now I have this, I can make it bigger by choosing my right bracket and smaller, clicking my left bracket. Bigger, right bracket, smaller, left bracket. And these are the colors that my brush is going to paint. Default brings it to black and white, so as they are right now. X changes them. So right now, it's white. I want to exit so that it's black. Because remember, black will conceal the edits I've done. The edits being that I've gotten rid of her freckles, right? So I start painting and oh my goodness, look at that. Do you see? Her nose freckles are now back. And you can see that tiny dot, there's her nose right there, right? It's that little black spot. I revealed the freckles on her nose. But watch, if I turn this off, well, look, there's those eyebrows. There's all these things that are back. Oh, got rid of them again. So you see, my edits are still there. I've just concealed this small portion. Okay, so that's some basic masking. Okay, and I can click on this layer and say, okay, this layer is going to be freckles. F-R-E-C-K. Freckles. This layer is freckles. All right, that's fantastic. I love that. Okay, so our next thing, let's work on this a little bit bigger, right? Let's come up here and say, okay, so we've got opacity, we've got adding a mask, we've got all of these different things, but let's get a little bit crazy up in here, shall we? Yeah, let's do that. I mean, what's Photoshop if it can't be a little bit crazy, right? Okay, so now the next thing that we want to do, we've learned how to add a mask by coming down here. We've learned how to use our brushes. We've learned black conceals, white reveals. We've learned how to use our brush tool on that. But let's come over here. I want to do something that's going to cover this whole area, right? So let's talk about ways that we can do this. Okay, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to get in my adjustment palette and I'm just going to do a curves layer, right? And say, I'm like, oh, you know, it's kind of bright here. I want to darken it so that she stands out a bit. Oh, see, it's much more dramatic now. I like it a lot. The background looks great, but her skin, it does not look great. It looks like she has a terrible sunburn. Oof. Okay, so I definitely don't want this edit on her skin. So what am I going to do, right? I come over here and I can say, okay, it's all white right now. So I can see this whole edit. What do I need to do? Grab my brush, right? I'm going to come up here and say, okay, let's bring down the opacity so I can work it up about 16%. Make sure 0% hardness, looking good. That was my right click so that I could check out my hardness. But you know, now we know, okay, I'm using my bracket key to make it a little bit bigger. And I'm gonna work on, okay, let's click, 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 working my way through here. Kind of take off that, that super duper dark stuff. Okay, looking absolutely spectacular. As you can see, do you see how I've really worked that off of her skin? All right, now we've got this where it's affecting a lot of the image, but not the whole image. I've been able to work off this and put a mask there. It's absolutely spectacular. Okay, so this looks great. I was able to work through this, but let's get even a little bit crazier, shall we? Oh, actually, let's get super crazy. I want to show you what happens if I have hardness. Look, I've turned my hardness all the way up to 100. And let's turn our opacity up to 100 so we can see what's going on. Look what happens. Oh, that's hardness. You don't want it. Look at that. Okay, so let's Command Control Z, get rid of that. Okay, because look, even if I'm at 100% opacity on my brush, which means a really strong brush, that's a strong brush, 100% opacity. Do you see how much gentler it is with 0% hardness? Okay, let's still get rid of that. That's still not something I really love. So if we say, yeah, we're trying to get rid of that, I mean, look, painting that in, it's almost imperceptible. You can build it up ever so gently, ever so slightly. It's really fantastic to make sure that your hardness is 0 and that you're working at a low opacity and building up your edit. So now we say, okay, this is a great edit. This is really good. I really like it. One thing that you can do, okay, so this one becomes, instead of curves, just to make it tidy, right? This is background. Okay, so we've got these named. They look fantastic. Remember how I had right here, you know, I'm saying, okay, I've been able to adjust opacities, right? Okay, adjust the opacity here. I can turn it up, turn it down. What if I say, you know what? Maybe I want to adjust the opacity on the whole thing. I can turn these into a group. I can select one, hold down my Shift key, select another, and click Command G. This becomes a group. So now they're grouped together and the opacity can be adjusted. So, whoa, look at, now she's got all her freckles back. Now they're gone. Somewhere in the middle, she's got a few, like the freckles are kind of light. And the background is sort of semi-dark. Okay, I can adjust them together. So grouping them, Command G, or if you want to undo it, you can, sorry, I just clicked Command G. You can undo your group if you decide, I don't love this. I really changed my mind. I don't want to do this. You can click Ungroup Layers. So groups are fantastic. We'll use them a few times. But here, okay, so now we've talked about kind of your basic brushes, masks, layers. Okay, so let's move into some more advanced masking techniques. Now that we've covered the basics, which you'll use the basics a lot, sometimes it's nice to be able to target a mask without having to go in and really kind of tweak it manually by brushing it in and trying to take it out and put it back and take it out until you get just the right mask that you're looking for. So let me kind of just talk through how we're going to make a really targeted mask. This is exciting. This may be something that if you're just starting out, you might feel like, oh my gosh, that's drinking from the fire hose. It's a bit too much. You know what? If this is more than you're at right now, that's okay. You can get comfortable using your early masking techniques, your basic masking techniques that honestly, that's what I use a lot of the time. But then as you discover that you're needing these options, come back and watch this over and over again and say, okay, I get this. This makes sense, because once you start using this type of masking technique, you'll find that your masking becomes very subtle and imperceptible. People won't even realize that you've masked anything. It's fantastic. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you first how to make a channel mask. So what I'm going to do, follow along with this, you're going to come into your channels. As you can see right here, channels. So go to your channels, and at the bottom of your channels palette, you'll see there's this little circle that looks like a dotted circle. So I'm going to click that. That's going to load a channel mask for me. And I can come back to my layers, and to load this into the mask of any of your adjustments, you just have to click that adjustment. I use curves a lot, but you can use it on really any of these curves or levels, really kind of anything that you're interested in using. You can click that, but I'm going to go with curves for the time being. So as you can see, notice my mask, rather than it being a strictly white rectangle, as is the norm, or even an inverted black rectangle, suddenly I've got this black and white rendition of this picture over here. So using what we know about white revealing and black concealing, we can see that the highlights of this image are being revealed and these darker shadow areas are being concealed. Okay, so let's kind of see what this does. So I say, you know what? I'm going to brighten her skin tones a bit. Maybe I'm going to pop them a little bit. So I'm going to, do you see how I'm brightening her skin tones? I'm going to do it like, there you go. That's obviously not how I would go with it in reality, but I wanted you to see that if you can see down here, do you see how it's not affected any of these darker tones? Not even the blacks in her hat. None of this has been lifted. But that white area up here, that's just gone absolutely crazy. Her skin, very much brighter. So let me bring this back down to a more reasonable level. So as you can see, we've definitely lifted areas of her skin. So that's given us a very targeted change here. Maybe I'll add, a pop of, just a little bit of pop to the skin tone or something right there. So we've just got a little lift and pop only targeted to her skin tone. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to mask it in and mask it off or anything like that. I've just targeted those skin tones. Okay, that's cool. So we've got the highlights taken care of. But what if we're not just looking at highlights? What if I wanted to do the shadows here? How would I go about that? Okay, so let me show you. Again, back to our channels tab. I've opened it up. And remember, I'm going to select the RGB. You need to make sure that these are selected. So if you have that mask open and that's all that's selected, make sure that you click back up here to reselect all the channels. So we've reselected the channels, and I'm going to click the load channel mask again. So as you can see, there's those marching ants again. We've got it selected out. I'm going to come back. I'm going to do another curves layer. Okay, except now look. They look exactly the same. The mask looks just exactly the same, doesn't it? Highlights are white and the shadows are black. So obviously that's just going to give us more of the same, just more of the same situation with the highlights, and that's not what I want. So how do you think we would handle this? Well, let's use inverting our mask again. So Command-I or Control-I if you're on a PC. And as you can see, now it's the exact opposite. The highlights are now in black, so they are concealed. And all of these areas that are in shadow have now been revealed. Okay, so maybe I just want to come in and pop this. Look at that. Suddenly, ooh, that was a little bit, I pulled it down a little bit heavy-handed. Okay, so now we've got a lot of pop in the background especially. So overall, I think that's fantastic. But as you can see, like now her skin, so we've got this really bright area, but then we've got this shadow area and it almost looks sunburned. It's gotten so dark because of pulling in those highlights again. It's gotten so dark that now I'm looking at it and saying, you know what? I don't really like how deep I've made the shadows on her face. Okay, so what am I going to do? Because I already have this mask, right? Well, it's no problem. We can come over. We've got our mask. We've got our brush selected. We're going to bring down that opacity again. Make sure as we check it, remember the hardness is 0. And I'm going to come over here. It's white. I'm going to click X, or I could switch it this way. Now it's black on top again. Okay, so I could just add to this mask and say, you know, let's just come in and brush, add on to the mask. Okay, I'm masking out what I just did with the curves here. I'm going to take that out. I'm adding to the mask that's already there so that this kind of sunburned red is gone from her skin. So the shadows of her skin reacted to that mask as we picked out the shadows. Okay, so now I've gotten rid of that so her skin didn't have that really strong red going on. So now this is the background. So we've got the background, we've got the highlights, and I can rename these. Remember how we talked about renaming? We can say this is skin tone, and this is background. Okay, fantastic. So I've got those. And again, let's just go over how do we group it. We hold down the Shift key and we click on both layers, Command G. So I could say, oh, you know what? I like it, but overall I think both of them are a little strong, and I could bring it down a little bit. I mean, here's 0. Here we are, you know, 50%-ish. Here's 100%. So maybe I say, I like it maybe about 65%. Looks great. I think that's a nice addition to the photo. So that was done very quickly. I didn't have to go in and make a million little adjustments to the mask to separate out those highlights and those shadows. I was able to target them very quickly with a channel mask. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this because now I just wanted to talk for a moment about the color range tool. This is another fantastic, slightly more advanced way to work on different areas of the image and load a mask specifically targeted. So to find, if you're going to find your color range, you're going to choose select, come to about the middle of the select menu, and you're going to come to color range. And here you can see it's already got something selected here. I'm not quite sure what has been selected, but I'm going to show you. So first of all, in the select, these are some of the preset type of things. You have things like out of gamut. This image doesn't really have a lot of out of gamut things. The reds are, pretty much within that. Nothing's blown out. Nothing's terribly clipped in the shadows. So overall, this is a photo that's going to be okay. Let me see. I might have another one over here. So let me go to one that I can sample out of gamut for you. Okay, so we've got this one. This area is probably a bit out of gamut. See how it's overly bright because the light behind has sort of blown it out. So I could go over here and I could choose select, color range, and maybe I'm going to come down here to choose out of gamut. Oh, well, I guess I pulled it back pretty well. Sorry. Okay, so these little areas are out of gamut. As you can see, it's selected areas that are blown. I think it's just kind of up along this area here. They're just overly bright. They might not print well. They might look like they're just really no texture. So if I did that, I could say, all right, that's great. I'm going to say that will load this mask here, and then I can load that into a curve. So actually, I should have opened that first. So that one is out of gamut. Let me go back and choose select, color range, out of gamut. Okay. And that loads it. It's you can hardly even see it, but as you can see, it's kind of pulled these areas back in to pull down those highlights. So we've got a little bit more texture in there, so it may print nicer. And I try very hard not to bring things out of gamut, but for printing, that's a very nice one to have. So let's go back here. Perfect. Okay. So the next thing that we can do, actually, let's load ourselves. Probably we'll do something in curves here and say, okay, what's the next thing that we're going to do? Select, color range. Let's start talking about what we could do. This one is fantastic. Do you see skin tones? So it's picked, she's got hair that's kind of in that skin tone range too. So some of her hair has been selected, but mostly it really is just her skin. So this is kind of interesting. Let's load that in. Do you see how it's already loaded up into my mask here, because this is what's active. So it's on this one. It's got that mask right there. So, all right. So, and if I wanted, maybe I thought, okay, you can play with this fuzziness. So now it's selected more, or it's selected almost nothing. You can kind of play with the fuzziness. I like to keep it around 25 or so, but if you feel like it's selecting things maybe too much or not enough, you can play with that fuzziness to see if you can get it targeted really specifically. Okay, so I can load this in, and as you see, I have my curve. So again, let's talk about maybe we're going to lift those skin tones. As you can see, it's really quite targeted specifically on her skin tones, darken them up. I'm being very obvious here. So you can see how it's selected only bits of the image versus the whole thing. It's very, very targeted, and I really didn't have to do much. As you can see, this is showing it's only targeting these areas, not a lot at all. Okay, so I'm gonna maybe take I guess we can leave that in for a second. And then I'm going to come and I'm going to add another one. We're going to do, let's show what else we can do here. I'm going to show a couple of things that we can do because this is kind of interesting. This has a lot of targeting. So there's skin tones. You can also, again, pick out highlights, mid-tone, shadows. Very useful, very convenient. Reds, yellow, like reds, which are skin tones. Yellows, you'll be surprised. That's kind of your colors, like your grasses and your leaves and things. You kind of think, oh, that's green. But green tends to be a little bit more of maybe kind of in this area, this bluer green, and this sort of yellowy green, which is more the typical color of foliage, is going to fall mostly into yellows. So there's different things like that. Obviously, you could work with blues and cyans, things like water and sky. You could sample pretty easily, but you can also sample colors. Okay, so I kind of want to show you, you can sample on your image here. But as you can see, it's only picking one thing. So maybe I want to work on this background. I want to deepen that background up again. Remember how we had done that recently? But it's only selecting one of the tones, which, I mean, that's not going to be very useful to me, is it? So what I can do is I can hold down my Shift key, and I want you to see what that does. Do you see my little dropper? So when I'm not holding down the Shift key, it just looks like a dropper. As soon as I touch that Shift key, it adds the plus sign. So it's going to keep adding to my selection. And the inverse, of course, we have that Option key, which is the crazy key that gives us the opposite. That adds a minus. So if I accidentally select too much, I can go back and deselect it by holding down my Option key. So it's really a good thing that way. So, okay, let's go around. Let's hold down that Shift key. And okay, I kind of want to get all of this area because I think that it would be important to get those good highlights. But then we have some up here. I'm going to pick some of these areas. I'm afraid if I pick this spot, it's going to go right into her face. So I don't want to pick that, but well, let's pick it for right now. So, oh, look, I clicked it and we're kind of starting to get into her skin a little bit. I think if I come up here, you know, I'm picking a lot more. Maybe I don't want to pick this. So I'm going to hold down my Option key. Okay, I got rid of that. Okay, I'm going to come back and kind of pick some of this. See, if I click too much, I've got almost all but her. Okay, I don't really want maybe the hair, right? So as you can see, I'm going along and just kind of picking and choosing different areas. Let's go with this. Actually, I don't want her skin selected. Okay, I want to say not her skin. I do want to pick this area. Let's just start over for a second and pick this area because I got a little bit too excited showing this. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's get this too. Okay, so there we go. Most of her hair, most of her skin, she's okay. We've got her pretty selected, and even the hat isn't too crazy. All right, so let's load this one in. As you can see, it's already pretty much loaded in there. So that's kind of cool. So again, we can come in and kind of darken up those areas. Okay, and I want you to see, because this is kind of how you can see. You can feather your mask, as you see, or I could have made it more fuzzy so that it would choose things that would fuzzy up that mask a little bit. But I wanted you to see this. I think this is important to kind of see. Do you see how in some of these areas, it's picked all of those spots so specifically, it's separated them from the others that you almost in these areas where those colors really start to intermingle. Do you see how it starts to look almost a little grainy? You start to have this sort of noisy look. So if you have that happen in here, that's where you're going to use that fuzziness or feathering. I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second. You can kind of feather that mask a bit to give it a little bit less of that grainy look. So there's a few different ways. And remember how I had talked about fuzziness. But I wanted you to see how really specifically this can pick those colors. It's kind of interesting how that happens. So the color range is really quite a lot of fun. Especially, I feel like that skin tone and those out of gamut ones can be very, very useful. Hopefully you aren't shooting a great deal out of gamut, but if you have little bits that are out of gamut and you know it's something that's going to get printed, you can kind of bring those back in, bring that texture back in so it doesn't just look like a solid mass of white or of blown out color. You can really kind of target those, and it works a lot of times with reds too. It can pull those reds back in, or those colors that get a little crazy quickly. Sometimes it's reds or hot pinks. Cameras sometimes don't know how to handle those. So these are a little bit more advanced ways of masking, but they can target very specifically what it is that you want to work on. All right, so the next thing that we're going to go into will be some of our ways to select using the tools over here. We have selection tools.